it is to nail the composition on paper one this year. 36% of the marks available are going for your ability to write in a really interesting and original way. There's no learning your way to success in this section. It's really about reading and practice. As I record this little commentary, you've got 5 weeks to the exam, not a huge amount of time. So, this is something that really you have to think about. Starting point has to be questions that they've asked on personal essays. A lot of you will answer this section, and it's good to have an idea of the type of thing that they ask. So, for example, here's 2020. They asked 2 personal essay questions. By the way, is there a guarantee, 100% guaranteed to be a personal essay? No. However, has there been a year where there has not been a personal essay option? No, not in 20 years. And I think there will definitely be a personal essay option this year. Will there be 2? Possibly. There's a pattern the last 3 years that they have given you a choice of personal essays, and I think the questions have been lovely. So here's 2020, just to remind you. Write a personal essay in which you reflect on what you were proud of in your life, or write a personal essay in which you celebrate friendship and reflect on how you have been influenced by the unique and diverse personalities of your friends. So, 2 titles which really allow you to talk as yourself. I think the crucial thing about the personal essay, look at all these other titles. What feeds your imagination? Places that help shape and define you. What you perceive as the pleasures particular to youth. The importance of personal space and quietness in the modern world. The useless clutter that is a feature of many aspects of our lives. Endings that you consider significant. Moments of uncertainty. What's really important is that you don't write in a cliched way. There's nothing wrong with writing about things that, you would imagine a lot of people would write about. So, for example, if you're going to write about what feeds your imagination, maybe you're going to talk about the books that you've read in your life. Okay? Or maybe you're going to talk about the natural world. Or maybe you're going to talk about music. Now, a lot of people, if they were writing that essay, would talk about those things. But it's the detail. It's the originality. It's the individual observation that can really make an essay, personal essay, stand out. So just if you look at those questions, you can see a couple of things that I think are worth considering before we move on. There have been personal essay titles which, over the years, which have been very tricky. I think that this one here, a personal essay in which you explore the storytelling evident in music and song and the impact and its impact on you as a listener, that's a tough old tough old question, you'd have to have really detailed knowledge of music and song to be able to, string out 1,000-word essay on that one. I could write it, but I'm really old. I was going home last night in the car, and I was listening to a song by Loudon Wainwright called Your Mother and I. If you've never heard of it, couldn't recommend that you listen to it more. It's a brilliant song, and essentially it's about him and his wife breaking up, and he writes this song to his children. I don't know if you've heard of Loudon Wainwright, but his daughter Martha and his son Rufus are both very famous singer-songwriters in their own right now today. But I listened to that song and I was moved by it. And I know the song. I've known the song for 20 years, but I hadn't heard it in a long time. And it was played on the radio. And it impacted on me because it made me think about, family and my own life and my love for my wife and my love for my children and how things can take a twist and take a turn. So you have to write with honesty when you're dealing with questions like that. But the point I'm saying is that question might not appeal to everybody. So remember, if you're relying, as I say consistently about every aspect of the exam, you should not rely on one particular type of question because it might not suit you when it comes up. So yeah, we want to write the personal essay. We want questions like, what do you consider to be the marvels of today's world? We want questions like your understanding of freedom and why you think it's important. We want questions like, what feeds our imagination, or indeed, as I said, in 2020, things that you're proud of in your life, because they're broad and they allow you to bring in a whole, different sources of information and different sources of reference. But the question might be tricky and it might not suit you. So remember 2011, your clothes, what they mean to you and what they say about you. What a ridiculous question that was. Remember, you can have a question like this one on useless clutter. Clutter refers to things both in a physical, but also I think in that question primarily in an emotional and psychological sense, that add nothing and get in the way of what's important. So that was a kind of an esoteric question, a difficult enough concept in that question. So remember, think before we write. Think, do I understand what the keywords mean in the question? Do I understand what the what the purpose or what the aim of the examiner was when positing this question to me? If I don't fully understand it, don't do it. There's 7 choices, pick a different choice. Remember, in the last number of exams, every question, including 2020, contains the instruction, reflect on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in the last 16, 17, 18, 19, 25 exams, we've had 2, 4, 6, 7 questions, all of which contain the instruction to reflect on, but not all personal essay titles contain that instruction. So you can see this one here, your response to endings that you consider significant, moments of uncertainty that you have experienced, that they didn't say reflect on. And the reason they didn't is because I suppose it was taken for granted that a personal essay would contain a reflective insight or would contain reflective insight. But the fact is, because the question didn't contain that instruction, students could maybe say that they didn't think they had to put a reflective insight into a personal essay. So now that phrase is built into personal essay questions, and it's really important that there's a reflective element in your personal essay. Now, what is the examiner looking for in a personal essay? I'm not going to drag this out too much, okay? So the examiner is looking for, as I said, reflective insights. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that when you write about your friends, that there's an element of thinking about the meaning and the role that they play in your life and commenting on it in an honest and thoughtful manner. I'm going to show you examples. Every paragraph or every section that you deal with in your personal essay, because don't forget you can break your points up into 2 or even 3 paragraphs, has to contain an element of thinking about the importance of that point in the light of the question and in the light of your life. There has to be a sense of kind of lessons learned. That's what reflective insights means. There has to be a sense of, do you know something? In that question in 2019, that place that, I used to go to, that library that my dad used to bring me to every Thursday after school, and he went off one side of the library to look for books, and I went into the kids section and I sat there for half an hour. Even though I wasn't in the same place as my dad, it was something that we did together. And the library, even when I go past it today, it always makes me think of that happy time when myself and my dad, just the 2 of us, would go off together. And it reminds me of how close we are and how much I love him. That's what reflective insights means. Okay? And again, if you're talking about what you're proud of in your life, a question, how can you answer a question on what you're proud of in your life without thinking about, meaning, without reflecting? Like if you're, the captain of your local, camogie team and you're proud of that, why are you proud of it? If you're somebody who during the pandemic has, kept in contact with a neighbor who maybe lives alone or has been vulnerable, an older person or somebody with a difficulty, and without being lacking humility, you're proud of the fact that you've made the effort to go and help. Why are you proud of that? If you're somebody who has, 20,000 followers on TikTok or on Instagram and you're really proud of that, why? So that idea that we've talked about all year, about contextualizing points, about explaining points, about not just saying things and then moving away from them, that's what reflective insights means. When we write a personal essay, there's an expectation we're going to be honest. Now, of course, you can students say, can I make things up? Of course you can. But the most important thing is that, the essay has to feel sincere. It has to feel as if you really are telling the truth. And that's why the confessional tone, I think, I spoke to somebody a couple of years ago, a colleague who I have great time and respect for. And she talked about how one of her children had a difficult time in their leaving cert because their teacher had told them, write about something meaningful to you, write about maybe, the loss of a loved one. And what happened was, as the student began to write, probably with the difficulty of the day, that they actually became upset and distracted by the fact they were writing about such a raw and emotional subject matter. So that's that's something to avoid, writing about something that you probably haven't processed or dealt with. But if you can write honestly, in a kind of in a way which maybe slightly makes you feel uncomfortable because you're being so honest. If you can write honestly, that can be really compelling. It can be really interesting to read if you can write not in a way which is overly emotional. Think about Bishop. Think about Elizabeth Bishop's poems. Think about something like Sestina, where she kind of takes a step back, and when she talks about the child is her. Or the prodigal, where she talks about the prodigal, and the prodigal is her. And it's packed full of emotion, but it's not emotional. And that's what confessional tone means. And that's, marry that to individual observation. And individual observation, by the way, means stop writing in feckin' cliches. Okay? Talk about your life, about the details of your life, about the places that you've been, the people that you know. I talk all the time when we talk about creative writing, whether it be a short story or a speech, about attention to incidental details. Those are the little details that don't appear to matter, but in their own, a combination of those details makes writing plausible, believable, and realistic. So you're looking for that. Of course, the personal pronoun has to be used throughout a personal essay. I'll show you examples in a moment. One of the things that you can read, that you can use, and by the way, it says anecdotes, etc. Personal essay writing, in many ways, is discursive writing. So you're arguing a point. You're saying my friends mean a lot to me. You're saying this place or these places were formative in my life. You're saying, this is what freedom means to me. You're saying, this is what my clothes, these are why my clothes are important and what they say about me. Whatever the hell. That's a statement that you have to take a stance on, and that's discursive writing. Now, if you're presenting a thesis, if you're making a statement that presents your point of view, you have to substantiate that, and that means you have to back it up with evidence. In a personal essay, anecdote is a great way of filling out and substantiating your points with evidence. Anecdote means little stories from your own experience that illustrate your point and that are told in a way that's interesting. And of course, you have originality and freshness, that great, vague quality that's difficult to define, but English teachers will always say you know it when you see it. Originality and freshness, it's got to do with the use of aesthetic language, the descriptive power. It's got to do with the energy of writing. It's got to do with writing in a way which is somehow quirky and unusual and striking and grabs the attention. So when you're writing a personal essay, of course, everything has to be purposeful. It has to be on the particulars of the question. But there has to be reflective element. There has to be anecdote. There has to be evidence. There has to be a confessional tone. It has to be open. It has to be honest. It has to be believable and individual and personal to you, and not generalized and not hackneyed and not cliched and not predictable. And then it has to be well written. Okay? Now I'm just going to show you some examples of what I'm talking about. Some of you know this document already. We talk about openings all the time. You know, I'm sitting down, or examiner's sitting down, and they've got, or any teacher, any reader, forget the bloody exam, right? Any reader is sitting down and they're looking at a piece of writing. They want to be engaged from the start. And if they're not engaged from the start, well, you know, they're very likely to think, okay, well, that's a bit boring. And if they think that's a bit boring, well, aren't they more likely to have a negative sense of what's coming? So you have to try and write in a way which, you know, grabs the attention from the start. Think about your opening line. Maybe think about opening with a quote. Maybe think about, you know, preparing some inspirational quotes from speeches or from books that you know, or podcasts that you listen to, or songs that you love. Something striking, something slightly unusual, something slightly or designed to be impactful at the start. I'm just going to read you something really quickly. It's from a book by John Cooper Clarke called I Want to Be Yours. And this was one of the best-selling memoirs of the last year, and a memoir is an extended piece of personal writing. Don't forget, if they, on the reading comprehension, if they ask you about memoir, well, they're asking you about personal writing. This is what John Cooper Clarke wrote in his first paragraph of his life story. Poetry is my first language, so forget the static data. I'm not on trial for murder. Rather than a ponderous trudge through the turgid facts of an ill-remembered life, to fleetingly call up various events that best illustrate the flavour of my existence at any given point, this is my aim. It's a tough call, but somebody's got to do it. Thank God it's me. Now, you see the honesty of that? Or could you hear the honesty of that? You know, he's speaking in his own voice. He's saying, I'm not going to, you know, go and give you the blow-by-blow account of my life. I'm going to just go in and I'm going to pick out fleeting moments, and I'm going to try and describe them in as poetic a way as possible, because that's who I am. Poetry is my life. And a killer opening line, something that grabs the attention, something that draws you in, is so important in good writing, all good writing, certainly in personal writing. No, I don't want to dwell on this too much. There's your, excuse me, fundamentals of good personal writing. What I want to do is show you some pieces of writing that are just magnificent, written by some of the greatest writers that I've read. Charles Bukowski would be a writer who, I suppose, has, I'm trying to be careful what I say here now. He's written some books that are unbelievably brilliant and wonderful and fantastic. He also wrote a whole load of often offensive, you know, doggerel, you know. You have to be careful when you're reading Bukowski what books you pick. But Hamon Rye is probably his most famous book. And it's a piece of autobiography. It's a memoir. It's a piece of personal writing. Just look at this and just listen to this. The first thing I remember is being under something. It was a table. I saw a table leg. I saw the legs of the people and a portion of the tablecloth hanging down. It was dark under there. I liked being under there. It must have been in Germany. I must have been between 1 and 2 years old. It was 1922. I felt good under the table. Nobody seemed to know that I was there. There was sunlight upon the rug and on the legs of the people. I liked the sunlight. The legs of the people were not interesting, not like the tablecloth which hung down, nor like the table leg, not like the sunlight. Now, that's the first paragraph of his book, Hamon Rye. Now, that is, if you were to take a photograph of what personal writing should be, that's it. It conforms exactly with the requirements of personal writing. It's detailed. You learn about, you know, where he's from. You learn about when it's an anecdote. You learn about when the anecdote took place. But not only that, it's easy to read. You have the personal pronoun I throughout. It's really honest. But not only that, it's delivered in a way which is his voice. It's unique. The language isn't complicated, but you have this deliberate repetition. You have this reflective element when he says, it was dark under the table, and he says, I liked being under there. Now that's reflective. See that line, I liked being under there. He's thinking about being under there and the fact that he liked it. And then he thinks about why he liked it. And it was because he felt good. And why did he feel good? Because nobody seemed to know that he was there. So there's reflective element in a piece of writing. He's looking back on this event. He's looking back on this memory he has. He's telling this anecdote in a very vivid and very simplistic way. And he's thinking about the lessons he's learned about himself from that memory. That's the kind of thing you're looking for in personal essay writing. That kind of originality, that kind of freshness, that kind of detail, that kind of honesty, that kind of reflective insights. Now, I want to show you another example of wonderful, honest, reflective writing. This is from The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Now, again, I'm just going to read, and I want you to think about what we're looking for. A confessional tone, honesty, anecdote, originality, freshness, aesthetic language, individual observation, the sense that the person is really writing in a truthful manner. I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children. Another fig was a famous poet. Another fig was a brilliant professor. And another fig was E.G., the amazing editor. And another fig was Europe and Africa and South America. And another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Attila and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions. And another fig was an Olympic lady crew champion. And beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest. And as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one they plopped to the ground at my feet. My God, Plath was a fantastic writer. What's she saying there? She's saying, I'm indecisive. She's saying, I'm hugely ambitious. She's saying, I feel like a failure because I haven't achieved any ambitions, because I'm unable to choose what matters. But she doesn't say that, because that would be boring. That would be bland. That would be monochrome, lacking any colour. Instead, she uses her imagination to bring up this story of the fig tree. And each fig represents a part of her ambition. And you learn so much about her desire to travel, her desire to succeed professionally, her desire to find love, her desire to find excitement in her life, her desire to be to represent her country in the Olympics. And then you have this amazing reference to her sitting in the crotch of the tree, starving to death. And there's what we call figurative language. There's a woman being emotionally honest without being emotional in the way she writes, saying that I'm dying here. I'm dying here because I don't know what to do with my life. I've so much choice. There's so many things I want to do, and I'm frozen. Now, when you go into the Leaving Cert, if you write in a predictable, as I say, hackneyed, cliched way, and there's no detail, you're not going to score well. Look at that piece of writing. It's brilliant. It's original. It's fresh. It's unusual. And yet it's easy to read and easy to understand and reflective and detailed and based in anecdotes. This is the kind of writing that we're looking for when it says originality and freshness. I want to show you one last example. If it was the book that I could recommend you read if you want to become a writer, And there are many books, many brilliant books about being a writer. Writers like to write about their process. I just love Stephen King's On Writing. It's amazing. He wrote this in the first part of that book, which is essentially the story of his childhood. My earliest memory is of imagining I was someone else. What a killer opening line that is. Not a great, and look at the personal pronoun, my and I, it's just, and the language is so simple, and yet you're going, okay, well, what does that mean? Explain. Imagining that I was in fact the Ringling Brothers circus strong boy. Look at the detail. See, that's what we mean by individual observation. The example is given. This was at my Aunt Ethelyn and Uncle Oren's house in Durham, Maine. Again, look at the details. It's not vague. It's pinpoint accurate. The name of the aunt, the name of the uncle, the location of the house, the state the house was in. My aunt remembers this quite clearly and says I was 2.5 or maybe 3 years old. And then listen to the anecdote. Just listen to the anecdote. I had found a cement cinder block in the corner of he'd say garage or garage, and had managed to pick it up. I carried it slowly across the garage's smooth cement floor. Look at the detail, right? The floor is smooth and cement. Those adjectives added to that noun bring that scene to life. Except in my mind, I was dressed in an animal skin singlet, probably a leopard skin. Suddenly you can see him. You're in the child's imagination. And carrying the cinder block across the centre ring, that's the American spelling. The vast crowd was silent. Look at the short sentence creating the tension in a humorous way in the child's mind, the sense of the breathless anticipation as they see the strong man come on. A brilliant blue-white spotlight marked my remarkable progress. Look at the compound word blue-white, the adjective that's used to describe the spotlight, and it's so vivid because it appeals to our sense of sight, our visual senses. Their wondering faces, adjective to noun, told a story. Never had they seen such an incredibly strong kid. And he's only 2, someone muttered in disbelief, and the onomatopoeia of muttered, bringing again the sounds of this imagined place to life. That's anecdote, that's colour, that's individual observation, that's originality, that's freshness. And all it needs, and if you read the book, you'll see there's a reflective element that comes after that when he talks about, the rest of that story. So when you're writing personal essays, and don't forget the personal essay is worth 36% of your overall grade this year. 36%. When you're writing the personal essay, you have to think about being honest, obviously purposeful to whatever the question is asking. You have to think about being honest without being emotional. That's what confessional tone doesn't mean emotional. It means being vulnerable. You've got to be detailed. You've got to be enthusiastic. You've got to be somehow descriptive and base your work around anecdote. That'll help. Here's an example that I wrote. I don't think you're going to think it's any good. It's certainly, I shouldn't really read my writing after reading Stephen bloody King and Charles Bukowski and the amazing Sylvia Plath. But here's an example. And this is in response to the question that was asked in 2017 on moments of insight and revelation. As a kid, I read a lot. I think it is either in you to read or not. And I was afflicted by the kind of asthma attacks that make you feel like you're breathing through the head of a pin, the outside world, running around and doing all the things my sisters and brothers did was often off limits for me. So I read a lot. I read the Chronicles of Narnia and the Enid Blyton novels. I read adventure and spy stories my dad left lying around the house. I read newspapers. I read my sister's fashion magazines. However, I don't think a book really made an impact on me until I was 14 and Mary Bugle, the teacher who saved me, handed me S.E. Hinton's novel The Outsiders. Have you read it? If not, you should. The story of Ponyboy and the greasers and teenage angst and avoidable tragedy is so well told. Now, I think that's, if I was reading, if one of you wrote that for me, I'd be so pleased. Again, in the light of that question. And that question is about moments of insight. And it's tying into the next paragraph, which we'll talk about why that book was so meaningful. But look at the anecdote about having asthma. Look at the personal details about the father and how he read a lot. Look at the names of the books that were read. Look at the types of books that were read. Look at the magazines. Look at the newspapers. Look at the use of repetition. I read. Hammering home this kind of personal element to the essay. Look at the confessional tone, but the reference to the teacher, Mary Bugle, the teacher who saved me. And she was. Mary Bugle intervened in my life and turned my life when I was a teenager. She's an amazing teacher. And if you're listening, Mary, respect. Okay? But the fact is, that's really good, clean, honest, interesting, fresh personal writing. If you're going to write a personal essay, it has to conform to those requirements. Read as much personal writing as you can over the course of the next 5 weeks, and don't write in vague, cliched, predictable, hackneyed style. Write in a way which is you and your voice, which is relevant and controlled and planned, and you should get the best grade you can get.